identified a trend in channels with oddly specific programming. While the Golf Channel played golf footage every hour of the day and every day of the week, the History Channel would explore the world's past through a series of television shows and specials. For some time, the History Channel was regarded as a brilliant educational exercise which proved that entertainment with value was possible in modern America. Today, however, the History Channel is seen either as a total oddity or a punchline, so far declined from its initial healthy goals that you would think it was a metaphor for my diet during the quarantine. Meanwhile, the Golf Channel still seems to play nothing but golf to this very day. What happened to history? This was a question I briefly considered covering in my last video before I realized that it was such a hefty topic that it really deserved to be split off and analyzed on its own. And so today we're going to be taking a look back at the programming of this station as we talk about the good, the bad, and the generally stupid. And this look back is arguably possible thanks to today's sponsor, GlassesUSA.com. For those of you who have been watching this channel for the last 6 months, which also is, I think, the last time I got a haircut, you'll know that I got this particular pair of glasses from GlassesUSA.com, and I wear them pretty much in every video, every week. And that fact is not true out of any obligation, but instead a legitimate pride for the quality and style of these lenses. GlassesUSA.com can save you up to 70% by cutting out the middleman and selling these glasses directly to you. And because of the virtual mirror, you can preview what each pair will look like before you make your purchase. It's really like being in the store, but from the safety of your own home. But wait, Quentin, I hear you saying, I don't have my prescription anymore. How can I buy glasses online? Well, and this is something I almost didn't believe when it was explained to me, you don't need your prescription at GlassesUSA.com. All you have to do is take a few tests with your current lenses and the app will tell you what your prescription is. That's magic right there. We live in the future. Everything's connected. And with this service, you get free shipping and returns and a 100% money-back guarantee. This is the definition of a no-risk purchase. Those are all things that regular glasses shops didn't always offer in the before time. GlassesUSA.com is also offering a special 70% off on all blue light lenses, which are designed to protect our eyes from the harmful light that can be emanated from all the screens we look at on a day-to-day basis, our phones, our TVs, our laptops, you name it. And all you have to do is use the code BLUE70 at checkout. You can get that on top of a special offer just for fans of this channel right now at the link at the top of the description. Throughout this video, I'm also going to be switching between the many glasses they sent me. So if you find yourself falling in love with any of the frames that I'm wearing in this one, all those will also be linked in the description down below.
We hear a lot about cursed films around horror productions. Crazy things that happen on set of The Exorcist, or The Omen, or Poltergeist. When you're working intensely on a project and something really anomalous occurs, it's tempting to say this project
Yo, MB, what's up?
Yeah, with all of this information about the movie universe, and then you enter the internet into
Connected
that,
to
forget
Bluetooth
about it.
problem and desktop Wi-Fi JMJ0. Bluetooth problem disconnected.
Skeletons to come out of a muddy pool. What do you do? Well, guess some real ones, I guess.
Our brains are designed.
Seeking out the earliest History Channel programming was a really interesting task. It was neat seeing how these different shows stuck to the basic theme while being totally unique and beyond just having different shows dedicated to different time periods. Inspector Gadget's Field Trip was a 1996 show which featured the character Inspector Gadget exploring different parts of the world. The gimmick being a mix of traditional animation with live-action footage of real locations, similar to the 2004 PBS show Postcards from Buster. History's Lost and Found, meanwhile, would go through various historical items of the past, ones which were once lost, and others which can still be found today. American Eats featured discussions on the history of America's favorite foods, from Spam to canned ravioli. Ancients Behaving Badly was a sensational look at figures in history known for horrible deeds. Forensic Fight Club is a show we won't talk about, and in my personal favorite example, Extreme Trains was about a guy who's really into trains, getting paid to ride them all day, and just showing off his boyish excitement about the fact that his life consists of doing this all the time.
Right here. What it boils down to, it's just like a giant teapot.
However, out of all of these, Modern Marvels probably stands out the most.
That was my jump
The
right
show
there.
is an exploration into the technology available in the modern age.
I used to love
Very
Modern
similar
Marvels.
to how it's made, but with more emphasis being put on the history of these achievements. Episodes
How It's
span
Made is
vastly
another good show,
from
too.
the Eiffel Tower to Kentucky bourbon, each providing a fascinating story and a lot of truth to be discovered. But it should be pointed out that just because something was on History Channel during its golden era doesn't mean that it's actually what I would call good documentary storytelling. And that's usually because they rarely chose to cover more than a surface level look at the past.
And that's what I realized about the History Channel after a while too. And I don't really watch the History Channel anymore. I'm a big history buff. Used to love the History Channel. And apparently that's why this guy made this videos like what happened to the History Channel, or what's the title of it actually? He calls it The Decline of the History Channel. And I can remember, like he's saying, like, yo, in the 90s, like the History Channel was good. It was lots of interesting documentaries. And as I got older and started reading more, like he said, you can see that the History Channel gave a somewhat superficial recap of historical moments, which is still pretty good because it's some stuff you're not going to learn in school for the most part. So it's like, more education. But then in like the mid 2000s, the shit just started sliding down with reality shows, and I was a really big fan of Ancient Aliens for a couple years, and then even got tired of that once I started doing more research and reading more and disagreeing with a lot of the ancient alien theories. And I don't know, like I said, when all the reality shows came up there, like Manja, what was it? Something Treasure Island or Bone Island or something. Then you had like Deep Sea Fishers and Ice Road Truckers, and like all these other reality shows, and it's like this is not history. Like this is how is Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel? I wasn't understanding that. I couldn't figure it out, and I don't know. After a while, I just did not find the History Channel entertaining or educational at all. Oh, Jess, appreciate it, bro. If you go to if you see in the little info bar at the bottom, my Instagram right here is Paintings by the Prince. So follow me on Instagram at Paintings by the Prince, and you can check out a lot more of my art on there. I've been getting crazy ass invites today. Well, in the past couple of days, like I've gotten 3 invitations to do some artistic stuff, which is pretty cool. Like I say, in the past couple of years, I haven't had to really submit anything or reach out to venues for exhibitions or anything like that. For the most part, I just sit back and kind of wait for people to contact me. And I don't know, for the past couple of years, I've just gotten so many contacts that, like I said, I don't have to go out and try to find places to show my art. And people are just really interested in what I'm doing, interested in my ideas and concepts and the quality of art that I produce. And I'll be showcased on a local website this Sunday. There's a young lady who recently opened up a community center, and she would like to have some of my art in her center. And there's another guy who just contacted me. I think he's from Georgia, and he wants me to be a part of a people of color artists network, which seems pretty cool as well. So always trying to network and meet new people. You never know who you're going to come across or what kind of opportunities present themselves. So, you know what I'm saying? Don't close any doors. Keep all the windows open just in case. You never know what might breeze in.
Remember when your middle school history teacher would come into class hungover, so she'd put on a documentary she found at the school library and just sort of sit in the dark for a while?
Yeah,
That's what these are for.
I remember those
It's
days.
textbook storytelling intended to invest you into the past without telling you the bits that make the story uncomfortable. It's Hamilton, the cable channel. It was really annoying when I found a documentary that talked about Andrew Jackson, who is, if you didn't know, one of the worst people in all of history, only to discover that they so quickly glossed over some of the...
Hello?
Hello, is Travis available?
Yes, this is he.
Hi, Travis. This is Joe giving you a call with L-Tech. How you doing today?
Hey, Joe, how's it going?
I'm doing well, man. How you been? You alright?
Yeah, pretty good, man. I'm doing pretty good.
That's good, man. That's good. I know it's been quite a while since we spoke.
Yeah.
Just figured I'd check in with you, man. Wasn't sure about kind of how where you're at in the market. Just want to really create a dialogue, man. Want to make sure everything's still going all right for you.
Yeah, actually, I remember the last time I was with you guys, I was down at Cintas for that one day and then wind up getting hired full time at where I'm at now currently still. So I'm still working for the same employer. It's a nonprofit. I've been able to maintain employment throughout this entire COVID-19 situation, which is definitely a plus. And I'm actually pretty happy where I'm at right now. It seems like this is working out pretty good for me. It's definitely not as much money as you had lined up on the table for me, but I think the trade off and having I feel fulfilled with my job. You know, we help the community. Like I said, it's a nonprofit, so we do a lot of positive activities throughout the community to try to help people, and I think that's more rewarding. I wish I could make a few more dollars, but but it's the name of the organization is Outreach Center for Community Resources, and they're located on 7th Ave over in Scranton, and they've been there for almost 30 years, and we do a lot of parenting programs. People who don't have custody of their kids, we do supervised visitations. We do alcohol and drug counseling, resume building, and job searches. There's almost anything that somebody who's down and out and who's just trying to get on their feet and just need some help, and they can come to us, and we'll try to help them in any way we can. I actually counsel like a men's group for guys who just got out of prison, just trying to get acclimated to having their freedom back and everything like that. So
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. And wait, you work with a lady named Jennifer Shoemaker?
yes, Jen Shoemaker sits right across from me. Me and her, she teaches the program that I'm an assistant for. Yeah, Jen Shoemaker. Wonderful. And do you know her?
So, it's, I've been in contact. We've been talking probably for the last month now, like every 2 weeks. So basically, it's a funny story. She actually worked with my sister, like years ago. They worked at like a detention center.
Mm-hmm.
So my sister was. I have this Facebook page where I go and I like post about like the new jobs that I'm hiring for, and she reached out to me, because she figured I worked for like a staffing agency, and she wanted to kind of introduce herself and tell me all about
Dang, dude, this is a small world. Yo.
That's why when you started like identical, if I knew you were working there, I'd be damn, I'm not getting done there all along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like a guarantee. I mean, you know, man, some of the jobs will require type of background check. And the background seems like that she was saying that might be something that she's at.
Yeah.
Some of the individuals you guys may work with, you know.
Exactly.
But it all depends on the company, though, and it also depends on what the charge is, how long it goes on, you know, things of that nature.
And
But
that's what I try to mentor the guys with too. Like when they're coming out is, and that's the I try to give them assessment. Like what skills do you have? You know, what employment have you held for the longest? Are you viable for the market? And I know they hate to talk about their charges and stuff, but all of that we do try to assess that so we can kind of gauge how much help we can give them. But if you've been in contact with Jen, and I'm pretty sure you see how decent and nice of a person she is. Dude, everybody we work with is like that, bro. Like everybody's like that. It's such a I want to say like family oriented, but it's not really. Everybody it works so well. All the personalities work so well, and everybody it's like one of those jobs where people like their job, and that's I don't think I've ever had it. I've never had employment like this where everybody likes what they're doing and they put 110% into it, dude.
that's awesome, man. That's definitely great. I mean, I know she would explain to me. I never even knew that it was North Lake, to be honest with you. I never heard of it. But I think it's awesome. You know, it's pretty, honestly, you feel like kind of exactly like similar to what I do. You know what I mean? Except that it's like a nonprofit, but you're still really trying to help people find employment.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, and you can probably tell, I mean, how stressful sometimes it gets. You know, you're trying to help people, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing I try to tell them too, especially if they don't want to talk about the background. Obviously, I know it's not probably like the most thing for anyone to do, especially when you're not too passionate. But just like you said, I basically try to just tell them, like, hey man, the more I know, the more I can do. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to waste anyone's time either, you know?
Yeah.
I know Jen, she was just like, hey, they don't charge anything on the county for anything. You know, that's great. Okay, as long as it goes on, you know, get me in there. Um, but I would say the same thing. I mean, if you know people that, you know, if you have some people you're trying to find employment, man, definitely, you know, if you want to give them my number, I'll do anything I
I
can.
can, yo, yeah, I can send them directly to you. This could be a really good partnership right here. I
Yeah,
I
man.
like
And
it.
I'm actually coming. I guess once you guys get back, our plan is because we're also like working from home too. Jen was saying that you guys are as well.
Yeah, they shut the office down almost completely.
So I guess like we're just waiting for. I mean, when we first started the thing, bro, you know, basically waiting for us to get back. I guess there's some sell-up days to go to.
Yeah,
And then we were told that even when it goes back, then we have to wait like another week or two after that and do like the touchdowns or like some welcome bonuses and
yeah.
you know all that good stuff. But we're planning on coming. Jen wants to set something up where I can come out there. I'll come out sometime in March so we can kind of like see the facility. But just try to see how we can be, you know, like a good partnership sometime. You know, at the end of the day, it's about getting people employment. You know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, dude. And even though I didn't stick with you guys, bro, I really appreciate like no lie in the past when in my transition looking for jobs, you had me in a position where I was set up to make more money than anybody else, and I mean how diligent you were communicating with that company, staying in contact with me. I couldn't ask anything else from you, bro. I really appreciate it. I mean,
Yeah.
I honestly see how concerned you were about that.
Right, man. And honestly, that's like you definitely know that you're gonna get by working with us. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it was good. I had like a little bit of an in with Jen because like she knows my sister, so she kind of knows like like your family. And like I'm serious about this work. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
She was
ex-
saying, I guess some of the frustrations they'll have going with other agencies. Like it's just like, hey, sign up here, and then we're gonna put you at the nearest one. You know,
yeah,
where ours is a little bit more different, like, especially if they have that kind of skill set. Like they're just gonna reach out, you know, to
Exactly.
And that's more along the lines of how we operate. You know what I mean? It's not just let's go for something that makes you 25. How about we go for like more mechanics who have some experience who actually make most of that shit.
And who's going to stick with the company without having so much turnover.
Exactly, exactly. And that's exactly what we do on a daily, daily basis, man. We're hiring for a company. I don't know if you heard of them out there, Mitsubishi Chemicals.
Mitsubishi Chemicals?
It was called something else before that, and I'm just having a blank spot right now.
You,
Especially new.
yeah, I think I have heard of those guys.
And they're looking for like extrusion operators.
Mm-hmm.
That's one reason too why I want to give a call. I wasn't sure exactly what. I remember you told me back then you're doing the nonprofit, but I wasn't sure if you're still going to be with them. But now I know that who you actually work for. Maybe you know somebody that could be interested in that. I'm not sure I don't have all the information in regards to like the background yet. What that's going to look like, but like we're just trying to get some candidates right now.
Okay.
Before we get things not settled in. But they said they do. They're like, hey, we've gotten some pretty good people from AZAC, and somewhere else. I think AZAC is the main one. Like people that come from there tend to work out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing too. I don't know if you still have like some people that maybe know from AZAC that may be looking right now.
Yeah, actually, I do. They went. I don't know, man. I've heard stories, and that company, like I said, they make good products, but it's just the management is so poor, and that's why their turnover rate is so high, and they lose so many good workers, and that's why these same guys can leave AZEC and go somewhere else and work out just fine, and it's so weird. Like the management there is lacking on so many levels. But I know somebody who recently left there. He put in 8 years, and he got to the point where he's like, dude, I can't take it. They keep turning me down for a lead position. And the guy who's been there for 2 years got a lead position over this guy. He put in 8 years, and he just left. He left, and
I don't understand that. Like you weren't willing to let that guy walk for 8 years.
8 years,
That stuff is like eyes.
and now he got it. And then you wanted him to train the new guy. So
But yeah, if you still have his information, man, definitely feel free. Pass it along. If you want to say, hey, we're hiring right now. And it's I want to work out the pay too with it. I want to say like maybe like close to the 20.
wow, yeah.
Just to walk into it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it is a contract to hire. They don't want. They're pretty particular about that. They don't really hire in big waves.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, it's a solid couple people in there. You know what I mean? And that's like how they kind of like. They don't want it to be like a small support situation. This is like they said one of their first time reaching out to like other agencies. They didn't want to use some of the other ones in the area.
Yeah.
And I forget how the gentleman said he got our information. It was from another company though out there. Because that's what they said what they were looking for. I'm like, well, you're not looking. They call it first was like machine operator, and I'm talking to this lady. And I mean, she like had a gist of it, but then she started talking about like, what they need to do. I'm like, are you talking about like an extrusion operator? Like that, and that's a lot different than like if you go somewhere machine operating that's just like the product into the like machine.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they don't know how to do like changeover setups or anything completely different. But then she was trying to say, well, she's like, what I do know are some of the companies where guys work out. And she mentioned AZAC. That's one. She's like, so if you know anyone, get some people on the horn. So.
Well, in actuality, this is working out great because, like I say, I put 5 years at AZEC, and the money's great, the benefit, everything is good except the management. And so, for the most part, some guys who come out of prison and they have that factory experience, I try to send them to AZEC, and I explain to them that those same scenarios, like, dude, you can make some money here, but you're gonna have to get used to the management. But now, if you have a different company, I don't have to try to send guys to AZEC no more. I can send them straight over to Mitsubishi.
Seriously, especially if you want to reach out to that big too, let them know. and I could at least get them, start a dialogue, on the phone, see if it's something that it could benefit them.
Yeah.
Especially if it's going to be like, it's hard, it's tough. I mean, now that you're on, this side of the man, seeing what the market has, I feel like Lackawanna County in general is just like lacking in the pay rate that that they should be getting paid for people. Compared to Luzerne County.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you look out on Hazelton, it's just like, somebody walking in the door, no experience, general production work, getting paid 14, 15 an hour to start. And then, you go to Lackawanna County, you get like a guy with a good skill set, and they're like, oh, we'll pay him like $13.50 and stuff. Like, what? Like, how? I don't, like, what do you mean? You're not going to, that's why I have a hard time finding, like, the skill set that's needed in a candidate,
Exactly.
No one's going to want to leave their company for that less amount of money,
Yeah.
And you get a lot of people too, man, with transportation being like an issue too. I remember Trent was telling me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's one of our biggest things is these guys normally need bus passes. And that's another reason I try to shoot for AZEC and some other companies right around Scranton, so that if they have to use public trans, it won't be too difficult for them to actually get to the locations.
Yeah.
So yeah, we work with that group of people who are right at the lower end, dude. And like I said, they're just trying to get all their shit together, and sometimes it's tough. And for the most part, a lot of them don't have their own transportation, which makes it rough for them to find decent, stable employment.
Yeah. I wish. Me and her were talking like I wish there was like a different way. Maybe they just like make it more of a step up and. They only have it at certain times, like during the week too, and then like they only go to so many places. Like you think they would definitely hit at least all of the like industrial parks.
I agree. Say the industrial parks at least. Exactly. I would have a 24-hour bus schedule on the industrial parks.
Yeah, and I feel like they would make more money.
Even
to benefit them, like not just thinking about it on one side of it. Like I feel like that's a pitch that you can put to them. Like they're gonna make more money because people need to go to work. You know what I mean? Like how are you supposed to get people to even pay for this when you guys aren't even giving them where they need to go?
That's more shifts for the bus drivers. That's more monthly bus passes that are gonna get purchased. That's more people who can make it to work and earn a living.
Exactly, man. I don't know. I don't get it. Something like that needs to change.
Yeah, when you run for mayor, I'm gonna vote for you.
Yes,
you got my vote.
Yes, sir. Well, hey, man, it was a pleasure catching up with you, man. And I'm looking forward. Hopefully, maybe when we start opening it up again, man, and I come out there, I'll be able to see you there too.
Oh yeah, definitely. When you come to meet with Outreach, I definitely want to be a part of the meeting. And once again, Joe, I really feel bad working that one day and then telling you that I wasn't gonna go back to the job. But like I said, Outreach is just.
Listen, you're doing something that you like doing. That's
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would be pointless for you to stay there for a company you didn't really want to be with, and then leave in like 3 months anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One day, if it's one day, it is what it is. It gave me more of an opportunity. We didn't waste a lot of time with it. You know what I mean? In terms of them hoping they've been the company gets their hopes up like, hey, we got this solid employee that you can really rely on, and then in reality, the employee doesn't generally want to go to work like you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you calling me, man, and reaching out to me, and I'm definitely gonna keep you in mind when I talk to these guys, and hopefully we can have this meeting in a couple of weeks and sit down and talk some more.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated too on it, man. Once it gets set in stone, I just talked with Jen and we talked on Friday, so we have it every 2 weeks. We just stay in touch.
Okay.
Like a scheduled call. So I'll let you know once we get kind of things squared away. Once hopefully both of us are back in the office.
Yeah.
And then same thing, man. If you want to talk to some guys like that guy you're talking about, AZEC, feel free to give me my number.
I definitely will, dude.
All right, brother. Hey, you take care, man. Stay safe.
You do too, man. Have a good evening.
All right. Later, man.
so much stuff going on right now. It's just like, so it's weird that that guy just called me, yo. So the last company I was working for, I worked there about 6 years, like five years, and wound up leaving the company. I was doing factory work. I've been doing factory and construction work basically my entire life, yo, like my whole work career, and I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it. In my teenage years, of course, I did like fast foods and restaurants. I realized I can't work with the public. I just can't work with the public, yo. Fuck the public. I don't like serving you food. I don't like doing services or anything for you, honestly. Like, if anybody, Joe Schmo off the streets, can walk into my job and curse me out because he having a bad day, and all I can do is be like, oh, the customer is right. I can't work no shit like that, yo. I can't work in no retail, food, man, fuck all that shit. So I did that as a kid. Then as a young adult, I did construction and factory work. And I'm tired of that shit. So when I left the last job I was at, I took about a year off from working, and I just focused on my art for almost a year. And then my bank account started to run slim. So I was like, shit, this nigga, I gotta make some money some kind of way. So I'm like, okay, let me try to find a job again. And so a friend of mine hooked me up with this organization that I work for now, Outreach Center for Community Resources. And they needed a part-time program assistant to help do childcare. And I was like, I can do that. It's like, we need somebody who's kind of creative and artistic, because when the people do childcare, we need them to engage with the kids and keep them entertained and try to teach them something. So if you want to, draw or paint or do like some kind of projects or something, I was like, no problem, I got it. It's part-time, do that. So I started doing that shit part-time for a couple months, and it was pretty good. But then my bank account kept going down. I wasn't making no money doing that shit. And then so I started looking for other jobs, and then I went to this staffing company or agency, and the dude who just called me, Joe, he works at the staffing agency finding people jobs, and he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to do what you do. I want to sit in the office and dress nice behind the desk and talk to people all day. How can I get your job? He was like, oh man, you ain't got no qualifications for my job. I'm like, fuck that. But anyway, I said, man, just find me some employment. So this dude found me a job, yo, at it's weird. It's like a sewing machine company. Really, it's Cintas. And the Cintas plant that I was gonna work at, all they do is, you know how mechanics or janitors or whoever wears a shirt and they have their little badge and it's actually stitched on their shirt and their name is stitched on their shirt. I was going to work for the company that stitches name tags and logos onto work shirts and work uniforms, Cintas. And so this dude found me this job doing maintenance at this place, and all it is just sewing machines and packaging shit. The old ladies run the sewing machines and they stitch the damn tags onto the clothes, and then they pack them up and ship them out. Now what I was gonna do is do maintenance on sewing machines. So when the thread get wrapped around the needle, or if the shit wouldn't work or whatever, I would go onto the floor and fix and repair the sewing machines. Yo, they was gonna pay me $18 an hour to start, and this is through a temp service. $18 an hour to start through the temp service, and the guy who just called me in the company said, look, we're gonna keep you as a temp as long as the hours. And then after I worked for so many hours through the temp service, they would hire me directly to the company, and my pay would have went up to $24 an hour. I would have been starting at 18, and then I think it was like 3 months, I would have jumped to $24 an hour, basically just working on sewing machines. But the only thing was the shift was from 3 to 11. I really didn't like that. And the drive was about a 40-minute drive. I really didn't like that. And so I went to work one day for that company. But like I said, I was already part-time at the company that I'm at now. And I told my supervisor, I said, hey, I'm not making enough money here. I'm gonna be looking for a different job, and I'll put in my 2 weeks notice. And so when I did that, I was like 1 or 2 days from my 2 weeks notice being up, and I just went ahead and started the other job anyway. So I went there, I worked at this sewing machine place for one day, and that day while I'm at work, basically going through orientation and stuff, my supervisor from our current job, she called me. She was like, hey, Travis, we just got some funding to add on another full-time employee. We want you to stay with us. We really like having you as a part of the organization, and we're willing to make you a full-time employee. I was like, what? Yes. So when I got off work from the factory that afternoon, I called the guy back. I was like, yo, Joe, man, my bad, bro. I know this is just one day, but I'm not coming back. No, so I was like, yo, the job that I got now, they said they're going to make me full-time instead of part-time, and I'd rather just do that instead of working in the factory from 3 to 11 at night. I can work in a nice office job, from 7 to 3 or 8 to 4, and dress nice and wear nice shirts and slacks and talk to people, like the kind of job that I wanted to have. But I actually enjoy my job because we do a lot of good for our community. We really do. Like, it's a non-profit organization, and we give out food. We give out, throughout this whole toilet paper crisis, we didn't gave out like thousands of rolls of toilet tissue and toilet paper and Kleenex and hand sanitizer. We give out clothes we have a program for men and women called Dress for Success, where if you have actually secured a job interview but you don't have a nice attire to wear, you can come to us and we'll give you like really nice clothes so that you can look professional at your interview. Or if one guy, he got a job doing road work as a flagger, but he didn't have steel-toe boots. So we got him boots so he can go to work, you know what I'm saying? And some guys don't have their own cars, so we'll supply them with a week's worth of bus passes so they can have transportation to and from work. And we just try to do everything we can to help people who really need help and who are trying to help themselves. That's the main part. You know what I'm saying? And there's one guy that I had to cut short because he's not trying to help himself. He's just, a moocher. Motherfucker just want to sit back and soak up without doing nothing for himself. And it's like, nah, I don't think so, bro. I'll cut you short, man. But for people who need help to help themselves, we got you covered, bro. If you really trying to get better and do better and be at a better place in your life, come holler at us. We'll do whatever we can to help you get there. And that's why I enjoy my job. That's why I don't want to leave. That's why I prefer to work for this organization instead of making $24 an hour working at a sewing machine plant, like not helping anybody, just fucking fixing on this inanimate object that doesn't mean shit to anybody. Like, I'd rather do something that has a direct positive impact on an individual's life, and that makes me happy. So that phone call took up some time. So let's get these brushes wet.
Greatest atrocities of his term as if they were simply footnotes to his legacy. It's baffling that someone could literally commit an act of genocide only to have a reflective documentary spend 15 seconds discussing this before spending 20 minutes talking about juicy 19th century drama.
He was the type of man, a complex individual to say the least, as all great individuals are.
This is a personal thing that bothers me that might not bother you, but I think that if you're going to make informative media about the past, you shouldn't purposefully underreport the actions and beliefs of these figures just to make them more likable. If you make a documentary about Thomas Jefferson, and you don't talk about the fact that he raped a 14-year-old,
You have everything we ever wanted, and we're gonna lose it.
I pay for your life.
Are you sure about this?
Mary Betts.
Yeah, just like with me.
This is happening, Betty.
Show him what he's losing. That is a crazy thing.
Lit Mobile popped over this wireless battery bank for an unboxing. Let's check this thing out and see what we got inside. This thing is solid. It's got nice grips on the side, it's shockproof, and it's water resistant. This battery bank has...
You've made a bad documentary about Thomas Jefferson. These reveal themselves to be the sort of films that think it's more important to remember the names of all the presidents as some sort of glorification of the American empire than to actually understand their contributions to society. But on the other hand, you could argue that from an educational standpoint, there is an importance to that. You could definitely argue that kids probably do need to have a Sesame Street version of history taught to them before they're able to actually learn the hard truths of what really happened. The point is that while it might be more satisfying in a timeline to say that all History Channel content was once the golden standard of journalism and then it just fell off the rails, the truth is that from the very beginning, history featured the sort of content we associate with it just to a more benign and less comedic degree. If one sees the show Ancient Aliens as a more bloated and exaggerated version of the Unsolved Mysteries UFO segments, then the middle ground between them is Mysteries, a 1994 History Channel series hosted by Leonard Nimoy.
Leonard Nimoy.
Our cosmic visitors were here many times at the beginning of human history. Perhaps they brought with them a message from the stars. They still lie buried in
Perhaps.
What would happen if extraterrestrials landed on the White House lawn? I don't think people would panic. I think they'd be more worried about what would happen to the stock market nowadays.
10 years later, in 2004, the network premiered Conspiracy? A show whose sole purpose in existing was to analyze recent historical events and then make it seem probable that they were all part of some secret scheme. In other words, the channel was platforming conspiracy theories in order to increase ratings. This is a great example of what I talked about in my last video about the motivations of reporting in shows like this. The producers of Conspiracy ? Obviously always had to put forward the conclusion that any event they covered was almost certainly some conspiracy. This is bad informative TV by default. The 2003 show Ancient Discoveries is perhaps the missing piece to the puzzle. The show would go through every known ancient civilization and would cover the great accomplishments of these cultures, as well as likely answers to how these different things were done. The only difference between Ancient Discoveries and Ancient Aliens is that Discoveries would explain that ancient man was actually smarter than we presume, and Aliens would say that ancient man was stupid, and thus their accomplishments are without explanation. However, I think the real thing that caused the content of history to change so suddenly was the sudden obsession cable channels developed with reality television in the mid to late 2000s. So there's this concept that comes attached to a lot of hyper-branded channels that's called network decay. The idea is that as networks struggle to compete over time, their content broadens and broadens until the stations become increasingly homogenized.
Yo, Peterson, what took you so long to holler at me, bro?
It can be hard to tell if a show was made for history.
I've been watching you for many years.
Sci-Fi, Travel Channel, Food Network.
Sure appreciate you. You finally said something, bro. Appreciate you making a comment in the stream. To the homie, King. Dang, dude. That's fucked up, bro. That's fucked up, dude. He been missing for a year? Wow. He got all his organs? They found all that. Well, after a year, ain't no organs gonna be there due to decomposition. But you know, man, motherfuckers go missing. It be them body snatchers, them organ dealers. You know what I'm saying? Somebody tried to kill me for my kidneys one time. Had to fight that bitch off with some nunchucks. I just made that up, but it sounds interesting. Because you can picture the whole thing in your head of me fighting some organ thieves off with nunchucks. Which makes for a comical scene. With a little bit of suspense. Just trying to make light of the situation, you know? This dude come in here with some depressing ass shit off the rip. He's like, hi, they just found my friend's dead body. Like, oh, yeah, well, you know, niggas die every day, B. Too soon? Too soon? My bad. They gonna have a proper funeral now? You know what I'm saying? And after a year, like I say, man, it ain't really no body, man. It's more of a carcass, pieces of a skeleton, some dental remains. You're not getting fingerprints off a body that's a year old. You know. Now it's called a cadaver. Abracadaver. Man, my bad. That was not a funny joke. Abracadaver. But it's making me laugh anyway. Damn. So morbid. Abracadaver. I gotta write that one down. This ain't no joke, man. You're talking about life and death here, man. Classified as a homicide? Bruh. Bruh. Of course it's a homicide. Where the body was found at? In the woods? In the lake? Was it buried? Or submerged beneath something? Underneath something? Or was it just like in a bag? In a rug? Did it have rope on it? You know? And was it close to the hometown? Like, was it even in the hometown? Or was it a county over or 2 counties over? Or right across the state line somewhere? It's all kind of questions, man, come into play, yo. Like that black kid who was found dead at school. His body was found rolled up in some wrestling mats or something. And the white boys said they ain't know nothing about it. They murdered that kid, yo. And hid the body at school. Who the fuck does that? Nobody ever got charged for that shit neither. It was ruled as an accident. Say he fell off the bleachers and fell like that. Oh no, there's no foul play here. Nothing to see, people. Nothing to see. Just some dead black guy. He died by himself. Bottom, 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 bottom. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. You wouldn't know the Pink Panther if that motherfucker slapped you in your face. Wacka 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 wacka. Ooh, somebody comment didn't go through. Lou, what it do? So they found his dog, his keys in his car, but his keys was down the road from the car, and it was on the county line. This shit smells like some foul play. Somebody tried to get the evidence away from their ass, just far enough to confuse people. Take it way out here to the county line, wipe this shit off real quick, throw this motherfucker's keys away. But that's crazy though. So he been missing for a year, but initially when he went missing, they did recover his vehicle and his keys. And they, like I say, somebody had to wipe that bitch down because they can't find no prints on that bitch. No evidence, no kind of no DNA evidence, no hairs, no footprints, no nothing. Just got his car and his keys and his dog. I'm not satisfied with this conclusion. I need a suspect. I ain't saying I'm gonna point at somebody and say you guilty, but I need to point at somebody and say, let me holler at you for a second. No cell phone records. Who he text last? Who he FaceTime last? Who he sent a message to on Facebook or Instagram last? Come on, man. It don't take that much to track a motherfucker nowadays, man. Everything you do. Everything you do track, bro. I track my damn self. I just put cameras all in my house and I turn them on and I let everybody see what the fuck I'm doing. You know, just broadcasting myself. Fuck it, man. It's gonna be that way anyhow. You ain't gonna be able to hide shit no more. You know what I'm saying? Somebody talking about I committed murder. Bitch, I was on YouTube at that time. How could I possibly have been the organ snatcher? Somebody pull up my PlayStation stream. See here, obviously, on the 18th of May, 2020, Travis Prince was clearly seen at his home painting a portrait of a baby. My client is not guilty of murder. Not knowing that I pre-recorded this episode and everything that I said, because I'm a fucking mastermind, super genius, evil, maniacal motherfucker. Super genius. They label this a homicide. This shit don't add up, man. Fuck you doing way out here? And you just got up and left his car, huh? Oh, he's probably abducted by aliens. Ain't nobody abducted by aliens, crazy motherfuckers. This man was murdered. in cold blood, unless it was summertime. Then it may have been slightly warm blood that he was murdered in. Oh, you and your wife? Holla at me, bro. This is a commission I'm working on right now. So as soon as I'm done with this commission, on to the next one. Scraping off a little bit of this, cause I'm just making a mess on this palette, yo. Shit's all in my way now. I don't know if y'all guys want to see this part. Alright, what was I gonna get? I was going to get some more of that flesh tone and I think that might be it for right now. Let me get a little bit of that color. But not just any flesh tone. You gotta make sure that it's Caucasian flesh tone. If it ain't that Caucasian, it ain't gonna work right. You know what I'm saying? I had that Caucasoid, man. Y'all don't like using that Caucasoid color? I like saying Caucasoid. It's a funny word. It's hella funny. To me, anyway. Anyway, it's funny to me. Flesh tone. Alright. One of my favorite colors. You know what I'm saying? You can narrow all white people down to one color. This color right here. This is, on average, what a white person looks like. This is Caucasian flesh tone. Dang, white people. Kind of put y'all in a little box, ain't it? Kind of boxed yourself in with that one. Jeez. You gotta go grieve. I wouldn't blame you, homie. You know what I'm saying? I don't like being sad at work either. Like, yo, I can't focus right now. Can't. Oh, I forgot. I need to put this back on the camera. Yeah, I would leave work too, man. If I can't focus, I can't concentrate, I ain't gonna do nothing but fuck up my job. Or not get my job done, whatever my task is. You know you didn't scan that box right there. My bad, bro. I can't focus right now, man. My bad. I might just need to clock out, bro. I need to go home, have a drink or something, man. I can't think straight right now. I got some shit on my mind. Boss man, you mind if I leave a little early today? I gotta go cry. I need a corner. I need a little quiet corner to go gather my thoughts in, because I'm feeling real mortal right now. You know what I'm saying? Feeling real vulnerable right now, like as if I could lose my life at any minute. I gotta contemplate what's important to me. I can't do that shit here around all y'all motherfuckers. I mean around all y'all people. I got to go. I'll be back tomorrow, maybe. If I'm late, don't call me. I'll call you. Well, you know we really need you. I don't think I'll be able to let you leave early today. Motherfucker, this is for grievances purposes. I'm not staying here. You can't make me stay here. Call somebody else in. You stay. You do my part. Ain't you in charge? Ain't you the manager? That's your job, to step up. Management. So manage this shit, motherfucker. That's what they pay you to do. Manage it. You'll manage some kind of way. You'll manage without me, bitch. I'm going home. I don't feel well. I'm not in the mood for none of y'all shit right now. At all. Not in the moods for your bullshit. Well, you know if you leave early, we're not gonna let you get overtime this week. Yo, fuck your overtime, bro. Fuck your overtime. I don't need it anyway. Good. Gucci, bitch. Gucci. Oh, Gucci. Little baby skin looking real. And it look like some real baby skin. Baby skin looking all extra soft. Because you put that baby oils on it. You got brand new skin, baby. Don't worry. You get them pimples and rashes and warts and scabs and sores. Then your skin be nice and rough. Like mine's. Baby skin looking hella real. Alright, I had the YouTube on pause so long, I don't even know what the hell we was listening to. I ain't gonna lie.
Learning Channel, and even Cartoon Network to some extent. as they all started airing reality TV, which is based around extreme characters doing weirdly specific things. And it feels like such a weird, quick transition from one or two of these shows being on History in 2007 to constantly seeing moments like this anytime I turn the station on today.
Your freaking makeup. You're only 14.
Everyone does it at school.
So you have to look like this to be their friends? You're not gonna do this. You're not gonna go just try and look like them and try and be the cool kids.
You were a cool kid in high school?
I can't help the fact that I was cool. But I didn't have to wear makeup to look cool. I didn't have to fit in.
Well, you are a guy.
I was the guy. I was a dude.
And it's easy to see why networks prefer shows like these. They're cheap to produce, you can make like 3 seasons in a year, you don't need writers, so if there's a strike, you can keep making TV. These people love hamming up the camera, and they're good at it. And the ratings are almost always killer. These shows don't necessarily demonstrate the end of History Channel being good at history, but their massive success marked the moment where the station sort of shrugged and went,
Yeah, fuck it.
I don't get it.
Fuck it. And this brings us back around to Ancient Aliens. The phrase, fuck it, personified as 15 seasons of an ongoing TV show. I watched a lot of Ancient Aliens for this video.
Damn, me and this
And
dude
let
on
me
the same
tell
boat.
you how not easy that was. Because this stuff rots your brain. The positive is that by absorbing as much as I could, I really was able to understand the show on a more general scale. I know a lot of you will expect this video to be me going through each and every one of the claims they've ever made and debunking them all one by one, but other YouTubers have done that better, and as I'll talk about later, this show is constructed in a way that's pretty much impossible to really debunk just by knocking down a few odd specific arguments. I'm more generally interested in talking about the format and the themes of its own existence. One of the first things I noticed when watching is that the show does this brilliantly deceptive thing, where they tend to mix legitimate sources with total nutjobs during information collages. So they'll interview someone with an Oxford history degree and have them talk about how the Aztecs had an impressive sewer system, and then they'll cut to some sci-fi author with no credentials, and he is the guy who says, "What if that sewer system was built by aliens?" It's essentially the same trick that Tiger King pulls off. Half the people in the documentary are trustable, and this tricks the audience into believing the whole narrative put forward, even if the reputable people only put forward a non-essential piece. And it's when we look into the backgrounds of the essential characters who are interviewed that things become a little more clear. Ancient Aliens presents itself as a documentary trying to reveal the truth about history, but in actuality, it's really a show about mythology, and not ancient mythology, but American middle-class 1950s folklore. Roswell, gray aliens, H.P. Lovecraft to some extent. The goal of these speakers is to make said folklore seem like a total reality, and they have motivation to do that. Most of them are public speakers about UFOs and aliens. They sell books, they go to conventions, they charge you money to take photos with them. Their bank accounts depend on people believing that aliens are real and on Earth. And thus, they'll probably come to the conclusion that anything they see has to be aliens, no matter what. I mean, for God's sakes, the cultures they present in this show aren't even allowed to invent basketball without that being blamed on aliens.
The players would knock a rubber ball through a stone hoop. It's thought that this is a representation of alignments of the sun.
I actually find it hard to disprove a lot of what's said on this show, because when I look into proving or disproving something, I think, what did they say? What did they mean to say? What's their source on that information? But half the time, they just make stuff up on the spot, and I don't know where they're getting any of the things they're saying.
If you take antibiotics and you treat them in the pyramid, the power of the antibiotic was multiplied tens of thousands of times.
Here's an episode where they claim that statues are alive.
Geologists point out that stone is not as lifeless as it might appear.
Rocks and us are made of the same exact thing.
The famous statues on Easter Island were said to be alive, but eventually there was a revolution on Easter Island, and they had to kill the statues. They would snap the neck of the statue. What archaeologists have done today is re-erected them on platforms, put the heads back on. Did these statues actually have some energy or power?
I know you guys want me to do a big deep dive down the rabbit hole here, just presenting a ton of evidence, but what do you expect me to say? Hey, I did 6 months of research overseas, and it turns out the Easter Island heads, they're rocks, apparently. Later on in the same episode, they claim that all of these statues are transport beacons, or maybe internet modems. They can't decide from 1 minute to the next. And again, like, how do you want me to debunk that? How do you want me to debunk that Aztec statues are internet modems? Backtracking a bit, did this dude just claim that all of the Easter Island heads were once knocked over and that archaeologists put them all back up? Do you realize how impossible that is? A lot of the Easter Island heads have been sitting in place so long that the earth has actually risen around them, and those statues have full bodies which almost no one has ever seen. There are other episodes of the show where they talk about this. They've done like 5 episodes about the Easter Island heads, and every time they come to a different stupid conclusion. A lot of times on this show, they talk about the concept of energy, and they never define what energy actually is. Half of the time they just say, this item has immense energy, and we're supposed to guess that there's some scientific meaning to that specific phrase, despite the fact that no one seems to have any idea what it means.
Karnak as a place is highly charged with energy. As you walk down these stone corridors, you can feel this charge.
The placement of the pyramids are very interesting because they seem to be placed where the energy is. And I think the ancients understood this very carefully.
I think that these stones are transmitting energy.
The stone statues become vessels of this cosmic energy.
Building a crystal in the exact shape of the human cranium does have some sort of energetic quality.
Ancient Aliens is structured almost exactly like a MatPat video. Now, if you've never seen a MatPat video, if you've never watched Game Theory, let me fill you in on what most of his videos are like. MatPat will set up a potential theory. He'll spend an excessive amount of time explaining what the details of that theory would entail, what it would mean, and at the very moment where you expect him to show any substantial evidence that proves that there is substance to this theory being real in any way, he distracts you with some stupid bullshit. It might be a joke, it might be a tangent, it might be a skit, but when the distraction is over, he just starts over and begins explaining a new theory that also doesn't have any evidence. And it's hard to say that he's lying, because MatPat's videos aren't really theories. They're open-ended questions that are meant to be left up to your imagination. Every guest speaker on this show, except for this guy, usually avoids saying that any idea is actually true, instead simply stating that it might be true, and that's all that really matters.
Is it possible that during the genetic manipulation of human beings, we at one point started out as Sasquatch and Bigfoot and Yetis?
And the answer is a potential yes.
That's why in every single episode, the narrator always says the words,
is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? But is it possible?
This is the core gimmick of Ancient Aliens. They never put the burden of proof on themselves, but instead casually glide off the fact that what they are presenting are overwhelmingly unfalsifiable claims. They can't prove themselves right, but I can't prove them wrong. And even if I did go through and pick apart dozens of examples they bring up, the speakers would just fall back on different pieces of evidence.
The way you prove the ancient astronaut theory is not with one single piece of evidence. It is a conglomeration of different puzzle pieces.
And when you really start to listen to these guest speakers, it's usually pretty obvious that a whole lot of them don't know anything about ancient cultures, and they're just sort of talking out their ass.
He is got a beard and a mustache. And that is an unusual thing because American Indians do not have beards and mustaches.
Exactly. The fact also that the beard and the mustache are so pronounced. They're not little wispy ones. They're major, so...
People are going to be really mad that I pointed this out, but, have you ever noticed all the guest speakers on Ancient Aliens are really, white? That's weird, right? Because this show is primarily about analyzing the culture of people of color in ancient history, and yet the only times I ever seem to notice a local being interviewed is to just give basic facts about the area. The locals are never the people claiming that it was actually aliens. The show is still on the air, it's got almost 200 episodes, and they're still making more of them, so I'm sure there are exceptions. But anytime I see it on TV, it's always a white dude describing things that non-white people did, saying that it was impossible for how undeveloped they were, and then saying that it had to be aliens.
How could the Easter Islanders have invented their own writing without some other cultural influence? They're doing things that would require precision work. How could they have had these advanced machining tools? The one answer would have to be they've gotten it from ancient aliens.
The Mayans could not possibly have developed these systems on their own, so it is clear that they were given to them by aliens out there.
Of course, the ongoing narrative of these moments is clearly a somewhat contradictory lack of respect for these civilizations and their people. Their art is interesting enough to analyze, their accomplishments impressive enough to praise, and yet the hosts always come back around to directly or indirectly saying that they were too unsophisticated to have accomplished any of this without outside.
They are on the front lines, following their true calling. Now is our time to show we care too.
I'd help, which is an opinion that they never seem to come to about European churches or castles or anything like that.
Clearly, someone told the local people how to place these stones into different areas.
So you're surmising the technology was given to these people?
The engineering knowledge, because this screams mathematics.
I will certainly concur to this extent. Someone or someones had extraordinary knowledge here. This is not easy to build.
No.
The funniest thing about this show to me is that if you believe all of these guest speakers, and you think that 90% of the accomplishments of people of color were done with the help of aliens, and meanwhile we have Stonehenge and nothing else, doesn't that imply that aliens don't like white people? I mean, aliens were going across the globe throughout all of early civilizations and meeting with all these different people and helping them invent things and helping stack structures and building pyramids for them, except for us. What did we do? What did we do that made aliens avoid talking to us for the rest of human civilization? I posted that joke on Twitter, and a couple select people got really, really mad. So now, in my ongoing fight to make everyone on the internet mad, I'm officially selling Aliens Don't Like White People merchandise on Redbubble. Get yourself some Aliens Don't Like White People t-shirts, coffee mugs, blankets, shower curtains. Deliver this message to the world with the utmost pride. Link in the description. Anyways, y'all want to see some alien titties?
Within these caves are different murals. We find some of the most amazing paintings of people emerging out of the clouds, and they're actually floating in midair. What a beautiful, poetic way to depict something that they might have witnessed. It was a complete misunderstanding of a visitation by technologically advanced space travelers.
If there's one word you hear in almost every episode of Ancient Aliens, especially from this guy, it's misunderstood or misinterpreted. Every time he talks about an ancient legend or a piece of art, it's the locals misunderstanding what they were really seeing, which he then uses to circle it all back around to legends that he personally believes in.
I see an astronaut in a helmet. I'm immediately reminded of misunderstood technology. It was some type of misunderstood technology, an extraterrestrial tool, because we didn't understand. Was it really flying snakes or gods that were snakes? Of course not. It was misunderstood technology. Now, of course, it wasn't a dragon in a biological nature, but it was a misinterpreted machine. They were misinterpreted flesh and blood extraterrestrials. A flesh and blood extraterrestrial whom our ancestors misinterpreted as being God. When it all comes down to it, it was all a huge misunderstanding.
To me, this is the equivalent of reading through ancient religions and trying to argue that each and every one was actually Jesus in a wig trying to mess with people. This is something that white people just generally tend to do a lot. Whenever we come up with our own folklore that is sort of unsubstantiated, we try and make it seem more legitimate by pointing to the cultures of other people and saying, look, they saw the same thing, they just didn't understand what they saw because they're stupid. This is something you see a lot in Bigfoot culture in America. Various hunters and locals will always claim that American Indians had stories of Bigfoot. But when you look into it, it's just some various mythical beast that has nothing to do with Sasquatch. But the Bigfoot hunters roll their eyes and say, oh, for the love of God, it was Bigfoot, they just didn't know what they saw. Our beliefs and our culture are one-to-one with reality, but the beliefs and cultures of minorities are skewed and warped because they aren't as smart as we are. This is, at best, cultural appropriation, and at worst, immaculate stupidity. I originally had a lot more to say about Bigfoot, but I realized that doing it right would just take up far too much time in the script. So if you guys want to see a Bigfoot video, leave a comment below, because I actually still don't know if it's a good idea or not. It is worth pointing out, though, that there is an episode of Ancient Aliens that claims that Bigfoot is an alien because the show is basically a parody of itself.
We can't rule it out as a possibility that Bigfoot is somehow an extraterrestrial species.
For people living with HIV, keep being you and ask your doctor about Biktarvy. Biktarvy is a complete...
One of the most annoying things about Ancient Aliens is that the show is not only promoting pseudo-archaeology, but it's making it harder for real archaeologists to do their job. One of the biggest examples to me is Puma Punku. Puma Punku is one of the most mysterious locations on Earth because we really only have theories about how they built it or what it was for. But one of the main reasons we know so little about it is that people keep going to Puma Punku and just taking shit. And it's mostly ancient astronaut vacationers who are taking these artifacts home and probably destroying them in search of magnetic energy or dragon eggs or whatever they believe in that week. This is something they do in the show. They take an artifact from Puma Punku back to America and they start cutting it up with power tools. They use a laser cutter and a diamond saw, and it's all just so this old dude can go, wow, the laser saw and the diamond saw cuts, they look different from the ones at Puma Punku. Of course they do! Why would ancient Bolivians have power tools? If you're gonna take ancient artifacts home with you, that's bad. You're a bad person. But at least, put them in a museum or something, or put them on your shelf like you're fucking Frasier. Don't run around cutting up ancient artifacts. I mean, for the love of God, we know what kind of stones were used at Puma Punku. Just get the same kind of stone and do your stupid little science fair experiments on that. Don't go around cutting up ancient artifacts in human history in your surreal, stupid hunt to prove that UFOs are real. You're not Nicolas Cage, dipshit. This is hacksaw archaeology. This is backyardigans archaeology. I mean, this big-haired motherfucker has a degree in sports information communication. Why are we allowing him to run around destroying ancient artifacts in his ongoing pursuit to consistently prove all of his theories wrong? Another episode of the show features this guest speaker and blindly supports his theory that a group of mounds in Bosnia are ancient pyramids that have been covered up by soil. He notes that this makes them the largest pyramids in known human history. This is all absolutely not true. These are hills. They slope up because that's what hills do. So what this guy has been doing has been raising money to go in and reshape the hills to look like pyramids, which he calls excavating lost sites. And in doing so, he's actually been destroying real archaeologically important locations in order to support this conspiracy theory that he's essentially invented in his own mind. And the reason he's been doing this is because this not only has bred a massive tourism industry, but has instilled a nationalist belief that the people living there descended from one of the most impressive ancient civilizations of all time. Many politicians have supported this conspiracy, and naysayers have been accused of being anti-Bosnian. What Ancient Aliens really supports in segments like this is something that used to be extremely common, but is now actively fought against. And that is archaeology with motivation. People used to say that archaeologists around the world would hunt for the past with a pickaxe in one hand and a Bible in the other. And because of that bias, a lot of the discoveries in the 20th century are now being questioned, and it's being asked if we've lost key moments in history because experts have become obsessed with proving their own biases correct, be it a belief in God or a belief in an advanced alien race. And this issue highlights exactly what we should and shouldn't be doing with our history books. It's not a question of what we can disprove, but what we can prove with utmost certainty. Running around arguing that certain unlikely situations must be considered simply by lack of not being certainly untrue is ludicrous and a waste of everyone's time. And arguing that impressive accomplishments of foreign cultures couldn't have been accomplished without concepts invented by modern American folklore is just insulting. Basically, this whole section of this video has been a long-winded way of arguing, say it with me now, just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it was aliens. Look, Ancient Aliens was the thing all of you came to hear me dunk on. It's even what the thumbnail is based around. But to me, it's no more than a roadside attraction in the story of History Channel. Because it's child's play to get the past wrong, and History Channel has done it time and time again. But what's really impressive is to get the future wrong every single time.
December 21st, 2012. Daybreak doesn't come. All remains dark. The world has come to an end. Is 2012 the year the cosmic clock finally winds down to 0 days, 0 hope?
Definitely, some of the gods will return. There's absolutely no doubt.
So, over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be covering a couple additional topics which could have fit into this video, but would have made it like an hour and 10 minutes long. And believe it or not, right now I'm really worried about making content that people actually feel comfortable clicking on. So they're going to be fun videos. They're going to be sort of tangentially related to History Channel. And it's just going to be some interesting little side voyages. And the first one is going to be talking about 2012 documentaries. And this one is just going to be fun. We're just going to shit on these. And trust me, there's a lot of funny stuff in there. So come back next week and we're going to be doing that. If you don't want to miss this, remember to go down and hit subscribe and click that bell, set it to all notifications. And follow me on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with how that next video is coming along. But more importantly, remember to go to that link at the top of the description right now to get a special discount just for you guys, my fans, at GlassesUSA.com. I can tell you guys with authority that these glasses are great because I wear them every single day, and I know you guys will like them too. So remember, go down to that link and use the code BLUE70 to get 70% off of all blue light lenses, which are intended to help protect your eyes from that extra screen time we're all soaking in right now. Check all that out and tell me what you guys think. These glasses are so good, aliens must have made them.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feel, and I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart, and I'm ready for love.
Okay, so we've made it to the end slate. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this and the video coming out next week. And if you want to see another video like this one right now, I suggest the video I made last year about Area 51 and alien culture, which covers much of the same ground. With that, this has been my Quentin Quarantine, and that's all you need.
And welcome, history buffs. My name is Nick Hodges, and in this very special episode, to celebrate reaching over 250,000 subscribers, we'll be leaving the confines of our planet and venturing far out into space on board Apollo 13. It's April 1970. Less than a year has passed since Neil Armstrong became the first man to set foot on the moon on Apollo 11. Since then, Apollo 12 made an equally successful landing, and NASA has now launched Apollo 13, also intended to land on the moon. But 56 hours later, and over 200,000 miles from Earth, an unforeseen accident occurs that jeopardizes the lives of the entire crew. This film is based on the true story of what those astronauts went through, and the collaborative effort of Mission Control to bring them back home alive. And over the course of this review, I'll be discussing in great length the history of the space race, I'll be covering Apollo 13's mission, and finally discuss how faithful was the film to what actually happened. This is Apollo 13. Isn't it super awesome that we now live in a time where we can look back on our own history and know that we have traveled into space? Not only that, but we have walked on the surface of the moon, the very celestial body that every single human being that has ever lived has gazed upon. It truly does capture the imagination.
Except blind people.
And not that long ago, such an idea.
Every single human being that has ever lived. No, because blind people can't see the moon.
In 1865, Jules Verne published the book From the Earth to the Moon, and got remarkably close to how it actually happened just over a century later with the Apollo 8 mission in 1968. For example, he decided that out of all the nations on Earth, that America would be the one to do it. And through his calculations, he predicted that the launch site would be in southern Florida. He predicted that it would be in the month of December, that it would take 3 days to travel to the moon, and that the capsule would return to Earth by being recovered at sea. The only big thing he got wrong was that in real life, a rocket was used, whilst the Americans in his book used a giant cannon. But even so, it's pretty amazing on how much he was able to get right. So the question stands. How did the romantic idea of traveling to the moon make the transition from science fiction to science fact? Well, the roots of mankind's greatest journey can be found at the end of World War II. It's September 1944, and Hitler is desperate to find a solution in winning the war. That was when he unleashed a new secret weapon, the V-2 rocket, the world's first ballistic missile. Packed with explosives, the V-2s were launched against Allied cities such as Paris, Antwerp, and London. Although a terrifying weapon, it's important to note that this was the first man-made object to cross the boundary of space before falling back to Earth and hitting its target. And this was certainly not lost on the German rocket scientist who developed it. His name was Wernher von Braun. His life's work had always been in the pursuit of space travel, and with his rocket technology, he was convinced that it was the key to reaching the heavens. In fact, you could say he was pretty much obsessed with it, and all other potential moral ambiguities were considered secondary. For example, later in life, when he was questioned about his V-2 rockets, he's quoted as saying, "The rocket worked perfectly, except for landing on the wrong planet." So when he joined the Nazi Party in 1937, he saw it as a career move, one that would get him all the funding he would ever need to realize his dream. In the final days of the war, the Allies and the Soviets were pushing further and further into Germany. Secretly, both sides were searching for von Braun, as they could see the terrible potential his weapons had, particularly the Americans, as they were already developing their own super weapon at the time. If von Braun's rocket technology could be combined with the atomic bomb, it would be the most destructive weapon in history. Neither the Americans nor the Soviets knew it yet, but they had just taken the first steps in what eventually became the space race. Now, von Braun was perfectly aware that the Third Reich's days were numbered, and if he wished to continue pursuing his dream of space travel, it would have to be elsewhere, especially since he knew that the Nazi officers who were protecting him and his team were him if it looked like he was going to fall in enemy hands. So obviously, he had to escape and weighed his options on who to surrender to. The Soviets were the less desirable choice, since it was well known how they treated their prisoners. Only real option was to surrender to the Americans, and after his escape, that's exactly what he did. In exchange for his full cooperation and knowledge of the V-2 rocket program, von Braun would be given full immunity and was whisked away to the United States. With von Braun out of their reach, the Soviets now had to play catch-up by scavenging abandoned V-2 rocket factories and finding other German rocket engineers who had been left behind in East Germany. They would also recruit one man to take von Braun's position as chief designer in their rocket program, and that man was Sergei Korolev. Now, he had been falsely imprisoned during the Great Purge under acts of sabotage in the Soviets' Rocket Research Institute, and was sentenced to 10 years in one of Stalin's gulags. In 1945, he was released after serving 6 years of his 10-year sentence by recommendation from one of the very men who had denounced him in the first place, his old colleague, Valentin Glushko. Now, I'm sure Glushko felt incredibly awkward about the whole situation, but he was smart enough to know that Sergei Korolev was the man for the job. Not only was he an innovator, a genius, but for all intents and purposes, he would become von Braun's rival and ultimately his equal, especially since they both shared the same dream of space travel. Although the world was stunned. This only served to strengthen Soviet resolve, because not only did the Americans possess the A-bomb now, but von Braun and his rockets.
Vernon von Braun.
Before this, however, the Soviet spy Klaus Fuchs, who had been working on the Manhattan Project, stole classified blueprints of the atom bomb and sent them to Moscow on the 2nd of July, 1945. Once the Soviets witnessed the atomic bomb's true destructive power in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Stalin immediately ordered that their own bombs be built, as well as continue developing their rocket technology. The Soviets were under the natural assumption that the next logical step for America would be to build missiles fitted with their atomic weapons. But surprisingly, that wasn't the case. Von Braun and his team weren't continuing their research. The Americans were quite happy to let their department collect dust, preferring to instead entrust future delivery of the bombs be made by planes. just like they had done in Japan. That was until they got their wake-up call. On the 29th of August 1949, the first Soviet atomic bomb was detonated on a test site in Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan. This time the West was horrified, especially with how quickly the Soviet Union was able to do it. And just a month later, on the 25th of September 1949, the Soviets had successfully launched an improved version of the B-2 rocket, which they dubbed the R-2. It had twice the range of the B-2 and was capable of hitting England. 1949 was significant because it marked the beginning of the nuclear arms race between America and the Soviet Union, each side working furiously to develop nuclear weapons capable of destroying each other. And much of the time they spent doing so was very neck and neck. On November 1st, 1952, the Americans tested the world's first hydrogen bomb in the Pacific Ocean. On the 12th of August, 1953, the Russians developed an H-bomb of their own and tested it in Kazakhstan. Now, some of you may be asking, what does all this have to do with space travel? Well, the development of the rocket technology necessary for space travel can only have been achieved with military funding. So when Sergei Korolev was asked if he could build a new rocket that could transport a thermonuclear warhead to America, he said yes, he could, because he knew that same rocket could also reach space and also transport and launch a satellite in Earth's orbit. The funding he got from the Soviet Union was exactly what he needed to make that happen. In America, however, von Braun was having a much harder time selling the idea to the US Army and was hardly getting any funding at all for his rockets. So what he decides to do instead, and I find this very funny by the way, is to go over the Army's head and instead sell the idea of space flight and traveling to the moon directly to the American people. How does he do this? Well, through Walt Disney, of course.
Here to reveal a plan for a trip around the moon is the chief of the guided missile development at the United States Army's Redstone Arsenal, Dr. Werner von Braun. A voyage around the moon must be made in two phases. A rocket ship taking off from the Earth's surface.
So, Disney helped Werner von Braun get funding for his rocket. Werner von Braun was a Nazi. A Nazi aerospace engineer. And after the fall of the Nazi regime, the Americans put together a program called Operation Paperclip, where they took all of the best and brightest Nazi and German scientists and engineers and brought them over to America. And made these motherfuckers develop our aerospace programs. I didn't know he got funded through Disney. That's crazy. Americans don't hate Nazis. We love Nazis.
The development of the rocket technology necessary for space travel can only have been achieved with military funding. So when Sergei Korolev was asked if he could build a new rocket to transport a thermonuclear warhead to America, he said yes, he could, because he knew that same rocket could also reach space and also transport and launch a satellite in Earth's orbit. The funding he got from the Soviet Union was exactly what he needed to make that happen. In America, however, von Braun was having a much harder time selling the idea to the US Army and was hardly getting any funding at all for his rockets. So what he decides to do instead, and I find this very funny by the way, is to go over the Army's head and instead sell the idea of space flight and traveling to the moon directly to the American people. How does he do this? Well, through Walt Disney, of course.
Here to reveal a plan for a trip around the moon is the chief of the guided missile development at the United States Army's Redstone Arsenal, Dr. Werner von Braun.
Werner von Braun.
A voyage around the moon must be made in two phases. A rocket ship taking off from the Earth's surface will use almost all the fuel it can carry just to attain a speed great enough to balance the pull of gravity. Unpowered, it will then keep circling the Earth in an orbit outside of the atmosphere.
This is the first phase. However, if we can refuel the ship in this orbit with fuel brought up by cargo rocket ships, it can set out on the second phase, the trip around the moon and back.
This televised primetime event made Dr. Wernher von Braun a household name as 40 million Americans were glued to their screens. Von Braun's plan absolutely worked as things began to get moving in Washington that would later help him get the funding he needed for his rockets.
The President today approved plans by this country of going forward for the launching of a small, unmanned, Earth-circling satellite in the region beyond the Earth's atmosphere.
What did we learn today, guys? When someone tells you not to follow your dreams, don't just accept it. It might very well happen if you keep at it. So anyway, back in the Soviet Union, Sergei Korolev was also watching how things were developing in America. Anxious to get his own satellite into orbit first, he worked furiously on his R-7 rocket. Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, told Korolev that if the R-7 worked, then he would be allowed to fit the next launch with a satellite. After several failures, the R-7 was finally able to launch successfully on August 21st, 1957, and traveled 3,700 miles, going further than any rocket before and capable of hitting America. Sergei Korolev could now proceed with his satellite, which they called Sputnik. Now, the satellite itself was very simple in design. It was just a relatively small ball, about 22.5 inches in diameter, with 4 long radio antennae. It was stripped down to only the bare essentials in order to make it light enough to be carried by the R-7. All it needed to do was to transmit a radio signal, proving to the world of its success. On the 4th of October, 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite into orbit. And the world took notice.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket. Here an artist's conception of how the feat was accomplished. A 3-stage rocket. Number 1, the booster, in the class of an intercontinental missile. Its weight estimated at 50 tons. The smaller second stage took over at 5,000 miles an hour and carried on to the highest point reached. 500 miles up, the artificial moon is boosted to a speed counterbalancing the pull of gravity and released. You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite. One of the great scientific feats of the age.
This was it. This was the moment that officially started the space race. It was the kick up the proverbial backside America needed to get them in the game. Its public was awash with different emotions. Some of them were excited with this scientific breakthrough, while others were even frightened.
Gets the American people alarmed that a foreign country, especially an enemy country, can do this. If we fear this.
But more than fear, more than excitement, the biggest thing Sputnik did was sting America's pride, and they couldn't let that slide. However, whilst America was rushing in with their own satellite, the Russians were already thinking one step ahead.
Putting a man in
November
space.
3rd, 1957, Sputnik 2 was launched. But this was no mere satellite.
What the astronaut
On board it
name
carried
was?
a dog called Laika, the
that was
first
a
living
dog?
creature in space. The purpose of the experiment was to see
Yeah,
if
it was-
an
I
animal
think they
or
put the Russians put the
eventually
first
a human
astronaut in
could
space too.
survive
I
the
can't think of that
stress
motherfucking
leaving
name now.
Earth's atmosphere. It was a complete success, although, rather sadly, Laika only survived for 5 hours in Earth's orbit before succumbing to heat exhaustion. Many people were outraged that the Soviets didn't even attempt to come up with a way to bring her back down beforehand. Regardless, it was clear to everyone that the Cold War would not only take place on Earth, but in outer space. And for years, Wernher von Braun had been fighting to make his voice heard in the military, but bureaucracy and politics had always stood in his way. Now that the Russians were in space, they were starting to pay attention. He would get his chance to go ahead with launching his satellite, but he had to wait, for some stupid reason, for the Navy to have first dibs. The Vanguard TB3 was America's first attempt to launch a satellite on December 6th, 1957. And as you can see here, it failed spectacularly because the Navy was sloppy and they rushed it. The Americans, hoping to have a little bit of their pride restored, instead became a laughingstock to the Soviet Union. Premier Khrushchev hit them with a sick burn, saying, "The United States sleeps under a Soviet moon." So since the Navy cocked up their chance,
The United
Wernher von
States
Braun
sleeps
finally
under a
got the
Soviet
go-ahead.
moon.
On the 31st
Burn.
of January 1958, Explorer 1 was launched without incident. Unlike Sputnik, this American satellite would collect scientific data from space. The success of Explorer 1 cannot be understated, as it allowed von Braun to have all the funding he would need. On July 29, 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration would be formed. NASA would take the charge in winning the space race for America. And less than a year later, they announced Project Mercury at a press conference, introducing a plan to put the first American into space. Meanwhile, the Soviets were still making headline news by sending probes to the moon as part of their lunar program. On October 7th, 1959, one of these probes, called Luna 3, sent back photographs, and for the first time in history, humans can now see what the dark side of the moon looks like. But this was still more of a sideshow, as the Soviets were also planning to put a man into space. After an intensive training program, the man who would be chosen for this was Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin.
Yeah,
On the
Yuri,
12th of
that's that
April
motherfucker's
1961, the Vostok 1 rocket was launched, carrying Yuri 17,500 miles an hour. Each step of the way, another booster rocket would drop off as he went higher and higher and higher, the G-force pressing up against his body until the final rocket stage shut down and Vostok 1 reached orbit. And like flicking a switch, the G-force was gone and was replaced with weightlessness. And then Yuri looked out the window of his capsule and became the first human being to ever see the Earth from space.
And it was flat. Yuri Gregor, whatever. Motherfucker will live in history forever, yo. The first man in space, yo. When motherfuckers traveling through the stars and colonizing other planets, they'll still fucking talk about this dude, yo. Like, yo, he was the first person ever in space, yo. That shit's crazy.
After just over an hour in orbit, the Vostok re-entered Earth's atmosphere, and as the first man to orbit the Earth, Yuri Gagarin received winning many medals and titles, including being awarded by Premier Khrushchev Hero of the Soviet Union, which was the highest honor of the nation. He also became an international celebrity as he traveled all over the globe doing interviews about his historic adventure, promoting the Soviet Union's superiority in space. To the Americans, however, it was another crushing blow to their national pride. And despite their own great accomplishment of putting Alan Shepard, the first American, into space less than a month later, it's still...
And this whole story right here, this story, which is true, this is all historical facts right here. This is what builds upon the moon landing hoax conspiracy theory. And because the motherfucking Russians was doing their shit, yo. First satellite, first animal, or a living being and living thing in space, the first man in space. And America couldn't get their shit together, yo. Like, it was a space race. And America's trying to hold face as, you know, the world's greatest empire. It's like, yo, we can't let this shit rock, yo. Tell these motherfuckers we been to the moon. But we haven't been to the moon. Fuck that shit. Fake it and tell them we did go to the moon. But sir, how are we gonna do that? Hold up, let me make a phone call. Hello? Stanley Kubrick? Yeah, I need you to come down to the Pentagon. We need to talk to you about something. Don't worry. The moon landing will be recorded. Fuck these Russians. Fuck they think they are. All in space and shit. With their fucking cosmonauts. Cosmos. Fuck that, yeah. Astronauts. Not cosmonauts. Fuck that shit. Oh, look. They're walking on the moon now. Really? Why the fucking flag blowing? Ain't no wind on the moon. Oh, no, it's, no, y'all just seeing stuff. Alright, I don't want to go there with the moon landing conspiracy. I already researched that shit a lot. It's just funny shit, you know? Some funny shit. Do I think we've been there? I don't know. Do I think we've been to the moon? I don't know. I'm gonna have to say that. Honestly, I think we have been, and we still have faked some stuff, which is weird. I think we faked a lot of it, but we did actually go there. But maybe we faked it before we went there, or we went there and saw some shit we really wasn't expecting to see, and then we made fake footage. I say, man, there's so much weird shit. I wasn't there on the Apollo missions. I don't know. I don't know if these motherfuckers really went there. They came back, man. The interviews was super weird as shit. Motherfuckers acting all strange. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the footage is kind of iffy and suspect and just doesn't seem right. But, I mean, fuck am I? I'm not no astrophysicist. I'm not even an avid astrologist. You know what I'm saying? Who am I to say anything? I'm just some dude who, like, watch videos on YouTube and shit, man. Some motherfuckers say we went to the moon. Some motherfuckers say we didn't go to the moon. Some people say 9/11 was an inside job. Some people say 9/11 was a terrorist attack. Man, it's hard to know what to believe, man. There's so much disinformation out there. You know what I'm saying? Shit's confusing. I try not to believe anything. Do you have solid, hard evidence? Because on most major shit, there is solid, hard evidence that goes in both directions. So it's like, shit, now what? Rubber ducky, you're the one. You make bath time lots of fun. Rubber ducky, you're the one for me. Bum 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 bum. Dun 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 dun. So was that annoying or not? No, it's all good. It's all good. I will annoy you more later.
Wasn't enough. NASA always seemed to be just one step behind the Soviets.
So they had to
and
fake
John
it.
F. Kennedy, the American president, decided that being in second place just wasn't going to cut it anymore.
So they had to fake
Instead
it.
of trying to catch up to the Soviets, he would shift NASA's attention to focus on the end goal. In one of the greatest speeches of all time, he publicly announced that America would put a man on the moon before the end of the decade.
So they had to
But
fake
why
it.
some say the moon? Why choose this as our goal?
Because it's not easy.
And they may
Because
well
it
ask,
is hard.
Why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
Not because it's easy, but because it is hard.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
We intend to win.
God, I love that man.
Let's make it a competition.
That was a president.
Oh my God.
Whatever his real political motivations may have been supporting all of this, it can't be denied that his passion and perseverance to get the American people and Congress behind NASA changed everything. They got better funding, better resources, and the Apollo program was started shortly afterwards with the goal to put Americans on the moon. This was the tipping point where things would begin to turn in America's favor. It's just such a shame he didn't live to see it. Unfortunately for Sergei Korolev, he would get nowhere near the same kind of support from his government for his planned mission to the moon. He was mostly expected to just work with what he had, and most of the technology wasn't as advanced as what the Americans had. Even after completing yet another historic achievement by having Alexei Leonov be the first man to spacewalk outside his capsule on the 18th of March, 1965. The real reason why is because the Soviet Union just saw the space race as yet another propaganda tool, and they weren't terribly interested in its scientific advancements. The funding he was given instead was just a fraction of what he really needed. Over the coming months, NASA was sending more and more manned missions into space, performing spacewalks of their own and doing docking procedures. All of the necessary steps to prepare for their trip to the moon. At last, the Americans were beginning to overtake the Soviets, but the worst blow to the Soviet space program came on the 14th of January, 1966, when tragically, Sergei Korolev died. This was brought about from a kidney disorder he had picked up during his time in the Gulag, and his health had been deteriorating due to the stress of his space missions. The doctors had previously warned him about this when he had his first heart attack in 1960 to back down from his work. Otherwise, they couldn't guarantee that he would live for much longer. But Sergei persevered despite this risk, fearing that Khrushchev would cancel the Soviet space program altogether. Such was his commitment to space exploration. Sad to say, but Korolev's death worked in NASA's favor. Von Braun's only true rival was now out of the picture, and they no longer had to truly concern themselves with the Soviets catching up. And then, on December 21st, 1968, just over 100 years after Jules Verne published his book, From the Earth to the Moon, NASA launched Apollo 8. On board were 3 astronauts, William Anders, Frank Borman, and Jim Lovell. This time they were leaving Earth and flying straight to the moon, traveling 234,000 miles, going further than any human being had ever gone before. Their 6-day mission would be to orbit the moon and return safely. Entering its orbit, they became the first human beings to ever look down on the lunar surface with the naked eye. But even more incredible was that as they made their way around its dark side, William Anders grabbed a camera and recorded a truly spectacular sight, the Earth rising over the moon's horizon. 2 more missions would follow, and still the Soviets were nowhere close to catching up with a manned mission of their own. And then, a year later, the day finally came. On July 16th, 1969, the world held its breath as Apollo 11 was launched, carrying Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins to the moon. This was the mission that would achieve Wernher von Braun's lifelong dream and fulfill a promise made by NASA and John F. Kennedy to land men on the moon before the end of the decade. 4 days later, Apollo 11 entered the moon's orbit. As Michael Collins stayed behind in the command module, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descended down to the surface on the lunar module. Back on Earth, 500 million people were watching every step of the way, marking it as one of the biggest televised events in history. Neil Armstrong opened the hatch and began making his way down the ladder. Then he said those immortal words.
I'm going to step off the limb. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
True to his words, John F. Kennedy's proposal to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade had finally been achieved. However, NASA wasn't quite done yet and would continue with further missions. After Apollo 11 came Apollo 12, another successful moon landing that took place on November 24th, 1969. Now, originally NASA had a budget for 10 moon landings, but despite how successful Apollo 11 was, there were politicians pressuring them to cut costs.
People in my state have been asking why we're continuing to fund this program now that we've beaten the Russians to the moon.
As a result of people like this, by the time Apollo 13 was scheduled to launch on April 11th, 1970, the 10 moon landings were to be cut down to 9, and its aftermath would cut down even more. And this is obviously where the movie begins. The crew selected for Apollo 13 was Fred Haise, the lunar module pilot, played by Bill Paxton, Ken Mattingly, the command module pilot, played by Gary Sinise, and finally Jim Lovell, the commander, played by Tom Hanks. Now, a cool thing to note about Jim Lovell is that by this point, he was the world's most traveled astronaut, with 572 hours of spaceflight, with 3 missions under his belt, including Apollo 8, the first manned mission to orbit the moon. Now he would get the opportunity to land on it. However, just a few days before the mission launch, the first bit of bad luck came when Ken Mattingly was exposed to German measles. As a precaution, NASA replaced him with the backup command module pilot, Jack Swigert, played by Kevin Bacon. Now, some people use this last-minute replacement as yet another example of the superstitious bad luck looming over the mission, or just because it was the 13th Apollo mission, and 13 is seen as an unlucky number. I'm glad to see that the movie accurately points out that the folks over at NASA aren't exactly a superstitious bunch.
I'm gonna walk on the moon, Marilyn.
I know. Can't believe it. Naturally, it's 13. Why 13?
It comes after 12, huh?
By the way, I'm happy to say that Marilyn's initial nervousness about the mission and it having bad luck because of the number 13 is authentically depicted in the movie, even more so when it's reinforced by this little moment with Marilyn's wedding ring that really did take place a day before the launch.
I was taking a shower and it just slipped right off my hand and it went into the drain, and I just was terrified because to me it was like an omen that something really was going to happen.
Now, I'm not exactly a superstitious guy, but I do think it's kind of funny how NASA was almost tempting fate. And that's because Apollo 13 was scheduled to launch on April 11th, 1970 at 13 past 1, or in military lingo, 1313. The reason for this was simply just because the timing presented the most optimal conditions that day. NASA was treating it like any other mission, and aside from a bumpy start with one of the engines at liftoff that was quickly corrected, everything was above board and just routine.
There's nothing routine about flying to the moon, I can vouch for that.
I totally agree with you, mate. Unfortunately, the public at the time didn't see it that way. The thing is, by Apollo 13, people were so used to NASA landing men on the moon that they were just bored by it. Apparently, they found it so boring that no news network wanted to show Apollo 13's live TV broadcast.
All the networks dumped us. One of them said we made going to the moon about as exciting as taking a trip to Pittsburgh.
Now, I understand that the Beatles broke up the day before, and yes, that was headline news, but seriously, how lame is that? I can't help but feel a little annoyed with how good everyone had it back then. And it's sad to think that arguably the most memorable thing that NASA's done since the Apollo program is this.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade.
Anyway, about 6 minutes after their live TV broadcast, which nobody watched, Mission Control asked Jack Swigert to stir the hydrogen and oxygen tanks in the service module.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
What the crew of Apollo 13 and Mission Control didn't know at the time was that the insulation covering the wires inside oxygen tank number 2 had accidentally melted off during a dress rehearsal a few weeks before. So when Jack Swigert flipped the switch, a spark from an exposed wire caused a fire and ignited the highly concentrated oxygen tanks. Back at Mission Control, the readings on their computers were going off the chart when they received that famous radio message.
Houston, we have a problem.
Now, that famous line was actually shortened in the movie. What was actually said was,
Houston, we've had a problem.
With all the confusion, Mission Control thought the problem had to be instrumental, since so many things were going wrong at once, whilst the Apollo 13 crew thought they had been hit by a meteor. This was just for the first few minutes, until Jim Lovell looked out the window.
We are venting something out into space.
I can see it outside of window 1 right now.
This was extremely bad. The oxygen supply wasn't just used for breathing, it was also mixed with the hydrogen in the fuel cells to generate water and power. One tank was completely depleted and the second was bleeding oxygen very quickly. In order to hold the flow, Houston decided that the reactant feed valves from the 2 fuel cells had to be closed. And when they gave the order to Apollo 13, it crushed them, because it could only mean one thing.
We just lost the moon.
The reason why was because once they had shut down those valves, they couldn't be turned back on again. They also knew that they needed 2 fuel cells to land on the moon. What little oxygen they had left was in the command module's small reserve tank. But the real problem wasn't that they could no longer land on the moon, but if they can make it back home alive. The command module by this point would be out of oxygen and power within minutes. To conserve as much as they could for re-entry in Earth's atmosphere, they had to shut it down and move themselves into the lunar module, or LEM, and use it as a lifeboat. But before they could do that, they had to transfer vital data from the command module's computers onto the LEM's computers. Now, the good thing about the LEM is that it had its own supply of power and oxygen. Just in the nick of time, the crew achieved everything they needed to do and moved into the LEM. Whilst all this was going on, Apollo 13's mission was finally making headline news. People all around the world watched as reports came in of how perilous the situation was. There was a very real possibility that Lovell, Hayes and Swigert would make another record for the history books, to be the first Americans to die in space. But the crew didn't have the luxury or the time to contemplate their odds. After they corrected their course, they had to focus on the next problem. With extremely limited power, how could they return to Earth?
The only engine we've got with enough power for a direct abort is the SPS on the service module. What Lovell has told us, it could have been damaged in an explosion, so let's consider that engine dead. We light that thing up, could blow the whole works. Just too risky.
So what was decided instead was to have Apollo 13 continue to the moon. There, they would use the moon's gravity to pull them into orbit, and with a brief engine burn from the LEM, it would slingshot them back to Earth. But there was also another issue. Mission Control knew that without being able to use the engine from the service module, Apollo 13's journey back would take much longer. The thing is, the LEM was built to land on the moon, but was designed to only support 2 men for 2 days. And based on their close proximity to the moon already, the LEM's weak engine burn would instead take them 4 days to return to Earth, meaning the very real possibility that they could run out of water, power, and air.
Never saw that movie, but how exciting and suspenseful. Alright guys, this has been my Monday after work quarantine stream. Appreciate you guys chilling in the studio with me, checking out the progress on the portraits. This painting is coming along nicely, starting to apply the 3rd layer of paint to the baby face. So it's starting to look really good. working on this piece throughout the week. Hope you guys are subscribed to the channel and have your notifications set to all, so you know as soon as I come in here and start streaming. I have several projects I'm working on, but this is my focal point right now, so I'll keep this on the easel until this one is done. I hired a photographer to do a photo shoot for me. Hopefully here the next few days I'll be able to have some new photos to start another commission that I was hired to do, and let's just keep pushing this art. I hope y'all guys have a good evening. Catch y'all next time. Peace.